All right. I do think I hear someone off mute. So if you could do me a favor and mute, please.
Please, we can just mute yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Kindly mute yourself. Thank you, everyone.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Ebony. As mentioned earlier, I'm a current undergraduate at MIT and also an avid user of Notion. And today I'm very excited to share with you some tips and tricks to boost your BA productivity with Notion. Right. A quick overview of our agenda for today. First off, I wanted to start off with a feature overview of Notion, just to get familiarized with all of the nuts and bolts of the platform. Additionally, I wanted to work with you all kind of in a live demo to create a dashboard using those features of Notion. And then I wanted to explore some use cases that might be relevant to you all as business analysts. And then finally, I wanted to wrap up and offer some time for some questions. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to start off with is to gauge the experience of the audience as it relates to Notion. So I actually am going to share this link in the chat. So it's a poll. There are 4 different options. It's just kind of some additional information so I can calibrate the presentation for those of you in the audience.
Did you place the link in the chat, Abby?
I believe I did.
I don't see it. You want me to place it? See if it comes up?
Oh, sure.
Okay, there it is. Oh.
It worked for me. I had to use my camera on my phone, but it worked.
Okay.
Okay. I might also, I tested it out earlier. I actually might try to create a poll on Zoom locally because that might be more convenient. So I'm going to zoom this slideshow. Let's go to polls. Okay. If you can access the poll, that would be great because essentially it's from a scale of, I guess, 1 to 4 on your familiarity. I'm not going to type out all of the answer choices on the local Zoom poll because that might take additional time. But essentially it goes from I'm completely new to I'm pretty experienced. So all right. Yeah, this is I'm having some technical difficulties associated with the Zoom link, so this might be something I just adjust to later. I'm going to operate this presentation on being relatively new to Notion, but not super comfortable with all of the features that you can interconnect with. And if there are any questions, of course, feel free to drop them in the chat and I will try to respond as they come up. Great. So first off, as an overview of Notion features, Notion is a all-in-one workspace built upon Pages. And I'll show a lot of these features in action as we move on to the presentation. But first, I wanted to give an overview. These pages are all composed of blocks, which are the building blocks of Notion. And these blocks can be formed by calling the / key. You'll see like blocks can be anything from lists to images to links and callouts and all different features. The other very important feature of Notion that I want to point out are databases. And databases, I think, are the most feature-rich and capable feature of Notion. Databases are essentially collections of pages that all have properties. So some examples of databases are over in these images over here, like this task database or this marketing task database. And then you can also utilize views to change your view of the data held in a database. The final feature that I want to call attention to are templates, which are essentially pre-built Notion dashboards that you can use. A lot of them are free and a lot of them are paid. And it's also a great feature that you'd want to take advantage of as a Notion user. I wanted to move on to demoing these features live because I feel like to understand how to use it, you kind of just have to build with it and play around with it. So I'm going to switch to my dashboard. Well, actually, I think I'll do this first. So when I'm creating a dashboard, I like to have objectives or goals for what I want to accomplish with it. Right now, I'm going to be creating an internship-oriented dashboard specifically because that's more relevant to me and my personal goals, and I can gauge what I need out of a dashboard. But a lot of the concepts that I use will be applicable to many different career paths or situations. So specifically for these goals, I want to, number one, have databases to store projects, people, and notes. And then I also want to have a place to track my goals. So I'm going to navigate over to my blank Notion page. Here. All right, so if you're not familiar, Notion starts off, you have blank pages. Sometimes they start you off with a template. I'm going to start off with a blank page, and I titled it aptly Internship Dashboard. If you'll recall, I wrote that I wanted to have a database databases, for people, projects, and notes. And then I also wanted to have a place to store my goals. What I did right here was just type in the document. At its core, Notion is a markdown-based like document website, so you can use it just as you would use like the Notes app, for example, or even in some ways like anything that's markdown based. So I just created goals and then I created lists. I want to focus now on the database feature for my applications. Recall that I stated that you could use the / to access all of the blocks within Notion. Here, you can see you can start with like basic text, which you don't really need to click that for, but it's there if you want to. You can have different headings, different size headings, different kinds of lists. Really, the features kind of go on there's way too much for me to cover today, so I'm just going to use the things that are relevant to me. But if you're working with Notion, I encourage you to look at these things, try them out, experiment, etc. So the first thing I wanted to do was I wanted to create a database for people. So I think I'm going to start off actually with a heading just to kind of divide. So what I did there was I hit backslash, I hit heading 1. I'm also going to use a divider just to visually divide the space. And the next thing I'm going to do is actually create a database in line. How I do this is I hit backslash and then I type database. And then I say whatever kind of database that I want to have. So for people, I'm going to use specifically a gallery view of a database. Why that's relevant is I want to be able to see, I guess, pictures of the people I'm talking about, right? So situation I'm imagining, I'm working on an internship. It's 3 months maybe, and I want a place to store the relevant information to each person. So I created a gallery view and then I create the database, and I'm gonna collapse this really quickly. And then I'm going to start with a new empty database. So Notion has a lot of places where they give you opportunities to use templates, start with like pre-made things. I typically prefer to start from something empty because it's more simplistic and I can start and build up from there. But that's all depending on use. I'll call this people. And I'm actually going to create a new page just to start. So I imagine I have some person that I work with. His name is Johnny Appleseed. What I think the next question you want to ask when you're creating databases is what information is relevant to each separate item or object in the database. So maybe Johnny Appleseed is my manager, right? So I want to say, okay, what is his role? Similar to the blocks, there's a lot of different properties that you can select in the database. Here, I think I want to just select or use a select property, which is just essentially you have different options, different pre-made options that you pick to create. So I'll say Johnny Appleseed is my manager. Maybe I also want to add, his email. So it's here for safekeeping. So jappleseed@gmail.com, right? You can do the same thing with a lot of different properties. I can do number for, I don't know, if there's any relevant number. These are all very flexible to the user. You can also, as a side note, you can add pictures if you'd like. There's a bunch of pre-made ones, but you can also upload them yourself. You can also, this is like a side note for gallery views, and this is something that I discovered over time by just using Notion. You can change the layout so that the card cover or the card preview here is actually the cover. So if you had like a gallery of people, you can see their faces on the gallery view. You can do things like change the size, and apologies if I'm, kind of going over things quite quickly, but there's just like a lot of features packed into it. But you can change the card size. You can, experiment around, see what works for you and what works for your uses. We'll also note that I wanted to create a projects database as well. So I'll do the same thing I did. I'll add a heading. Maybe I'll capitalize these. I'll add a heading, and then I'll add a divider just for visual purposes. And I want to have a separate database for my projects. So I think I'll do the same thing. I'll create a database in line. And I think this time I might consider using a board view. So yeah, I'll use a board view this time. And the reason why I choose this is because you can actually like divide things into categories. Specifically here it's status, but you can divide things into category and move it around. I'll title this projects. And I'm thinking as like an intern working on a project or working on projects, like how do I want to manage these? So I'll do the same thing I did earlier with Johnny Appleseed. I have maybe project 1. I do see a question in the chat. Notion is free, I want to say for the most part. But there's a payment or a paid version. I don't personally use it because the free version does all that I need to. Right. So if you'll note, like we already kind of have some pre-populated properties here that Notion has given to us. You have an assign block, which essentially if you have people that use Notion, you can assign it to them and collaborate that way. I don't personally have that, so I don't personally use that. So I actually am gonna, I think, get rid of this property just because I don't need it. Here, I think I want to add things like a date, where I can rename this to deadline. I can add things like, maybe I'll do multi-select to talk about, multi-select specifically for the programming languages I'll be using here. And I can tag things like C++ or C. And maybe that's all that's really relevant to me. You can also create pages inside of the page because all this is, like I said earlier, a database is a collection of pages. So what's happening here is I can write stuff like I would on any other page inside of this database. I think actually here I want to show you creating templates within your databases. So specifically for projects, if there is information that I want to be organized the same way across all of my project pages, I can create a template so that it's pre-populated with what I need it to. So I can call this project template. And then I think maybe on a project, I want to have a place for my objectives. So the same kind of organization scheme. I have objectives here, the divider. I'll put a place for me to have a list. Here we go. And then I also want to have a place for my resources. So you can, much like a lot of like Google Slides or PowerPoint, you can select blocks and then duplicate them using the Control D key. That's what I just did. And then I want to rename this part resources, right? So here's my template that I created for my projects database. Now, if you navigate back to your project, you'll see here that I have a project template. So now I can use that and select that. And now there's a place for me to write on project 1, right? Same thing. If I have project 2 that maybe I'm already started, I can call this project 2 and open that and use the same project template. Another cool feature about databases are, there's all these customization options, right? Like you can filter out specific like projects from the view. So for example, if I don't want to see things that are done, I could hit this filter button, filter by, whatever is relevant to me. You can also show properties, which I think is really relevant because sometimes things are important for you to see without selecting on it or selecting it. So I can show things like programming language. So it pops up in this view. I can also show a deadline, but because I haven't assigned a deadline to anything, it's not going to show up until I do that. So that's also useful. You can group items. So right now it's grouped by status, but if I wanted to group it by programming language, I could do that. Additionally, I could use subgroups, which are additional groups. That gets kind of complex though, so I tend to not have the subgroups on. And the other feature is that you can view this data in different formats. So right now I have my projects in the board view, but let's say I wanted to see them or on a calendar, right? Because I have deadlines attached to them, or I will plan to have deadlines attached to them. Right now you can see that there's nothing on the calendar and it's because nothing has a date. So if I go here and I, drag something and I know this is due on the 14th, then maybe project 1 is due on the 18th. You can view that data in a different format. It's very similar with all of the other different views that you can create. It just depends on what's relevant to you as, to your uses. But I find that calendar, board view, tend to be very useful for managing different projects. You'll also note that I Okay, one more note on relation or database features. We can also take a look at something called relations. It's a specific property in Notion that I find that's not as self-explanatory as the other ones, but it's very useful. Essentially, a relation is connections between two databases. So what you'll do is you go to create a property, you can select relation, and then you can link it to an existing database. So specifically, the application for this relation is I'm thinking, okay, I have a project. Who is working with me on the project in my people database? So I can select that. I'll say I want to relate my projects database to my people database. So I'll search people. A few notes on this. So this is the relation. The limit is just how many I'm limiting this property to have. So if I just wanted to connect it to one page at a time, I could do that, but I don't need to because multiple people can work with me on a project. I also can have a two-way relation, which I will turn on because on people, I want to be able to see what projects the people are talking about. The same way how on projects, I want to see what people are relevant to it. And I can show you what that looks like in a second, but I will call that projects actually. It's, pre-populated. Right. So now if on project one, I know that I'm working with Johnny Appleseed, I can select that here. Same way as earlier, I can select people and have it show up here. Same way here, I can select properties and have projects show up. There's many different ways to customize the kind of views that you want to see. I think okay. Yeah, the final database that I wanted to work on was Notes, which was very similar to before. Creating a database, working with that. I think I'll go for having a table view this time. I'll create a new empty database and I'll title this Notes. I actually do want to add a heading. Oh, you can also access the block selection by pressing the plus to the block before that you want to add it to. So here I just said, click to add a block and I want to add a heading just so I can title this Notes as well with a divider to keep the same kind of scheme going. In my Notes database, I want to keep it relatively simple. I think I want to have I don't want to have a template because I think I want to keep it kind of loose, but I do want to have some different properties. Namely, I want to be able to connect it back to my projects database. So I'll add a relation like I did earlier. I won't make it two-way because I think there will be a lot of nodes connected to the projects and I don't want it to get too cluttered. So it's just going to be one relation, meaning that it's only going to show up on the nodes database. I'll call that projects. And then I also want to maybe add a date. Yeah, I'll add a date of the date that the node was created. And so there's a simple notes database. I can select the project that it's connected to, and it won't pop up on the projects. So it stays pretty simple. The final thing that I wanted to do was to have a place to track my goals. And I actually want to put this up top because I want it to be clear and center when I open Notion. So here I'll use the / key and I'll type one of my favorite blocks, which is call out. It's very simple. And it's exactly what it sounds like. It's just a place for your writing to stand out in Notion. You can change the emoji for, whatever, whatever's relevant. So I typically like to use a star when I have these kind of call outs. And then I can start by titling this block like goals. Maybe I want to say by the end of my projects or by the end of my internship, because that's what we're working on here. With a call out, you can add things. So you can just say complete my project. Maybe meet or connect with new people. things like that, and I can just keep it called out and in the center. You can also move blocks inside of a call out, so or just have them in general. If I wanted to have an image here, I could. I'm not going to because I don't know of any image that I could fit, but I like callouts because they're very bold and central. All right, so after doing all this, what I essentially achieved was creating a centralized place for me to manage everything that's relevant to me as it relates to this specific internship. I created 3 databases, one which connects to the 2 others, and then of course the 2 others only connect to that one. So like I have projects, I can connect people, I can write down relevant information. At the end of the day, Notion is at its core a like note-taking platform. So that's what a lot of the features are built around. In terms of like there's customization options as well. So I could go up here and I change the font, change the width, things like that. It just depends on what works for you. Are there any questions on this? Any features that you'd like me to go more into detail on?
I do have a
okay.
question in the chat here. Says,
Yes.
what is the difference between a table and a database? What
Mhm.
is a use case to use a table, and what is a use case to use a database? You might want to shed
Sure.
more light on that.
Yeah, great question. So this table is a view of a database specifically. So a database in Notion, all it is a collection of pages, and each page has a set of properties that you've assigned to it. So here, this is my notes database expressed in the form of a table. This is my projects database expressed in the form of a board. And it's the same, like I can go over and express it in the form of a calendar. So you'll always have like a database under any like collection of data, I guess, in this way, or collection of pages in this way. There is a totally separate like table in Notion. I'm not sure if like you were talking about the view or the database. So there's like, you'll see like there's table and then there's table view of a database. Tables are just like simple like markdown tables. So, you could put like very simple stuff in here. There's no background database. I haven't really used these because I haven't found a way to use them. But they're there. But databases are just like what's, I guess, under the hood, kind of. In terms of like the use case of a database, I feel you can use them for anything. It just depends on like if you want to express it in this form. So for example, I thought notes would be best expressed as a table of notes. So for example, if I have note 1 and I also have note 2, I find that like notes are best expressed in this form because then you can see everything, you can open it up, open the page, take a note. Projects are expressed in this form because I can move things around and manage them and see all the data like or pretty quickly. Right. Okay. So now that I've kind of walked you through working on creating a dashboard in Notion, I do want to move on to showing you some templates that might work for you all. Just 1 second. Great. Some use cases. I've actually collected some. Another question I see is, can you collaborate with other users on the same file? Yes, you can. They both have to be Notion users. And I'm not familiar off the top of my head, but that might be where like the paid plan kind of comes in. I think there might be a limit on the amount of users you can collaborate with. last time I checked, but that is something to check on Notion's website. But I do know collaboration is possible, which is why like there's the option of using or the assign property in a database. Oftentimes you can assign things to people and collaborate that way as well. All right, so I do have a few templates that I kind of want to discuss the idea of like how you can start with these and implement these into your life. Most notably, I have a project management template, a note taker template, and a KPIs tracker template. I actually have to switch back to Notion for this because I have them. All right, so first off, a project management template I found, and these links will all be on the Google Slides, which will be shared. So these are all accessible if you have any interest in them. Here's a project management template. It was not made by me. The creator will be shared in the link that's attached to the slide. But here's an example for a bit of a more like complex template if you'd like to use it. We have a few databases here that you can use and that are integrated together. They've created a lot of different properties that might be relevant. So, you know, of course, these are the kinds of things that you would probably alter to like better suit your needs. For example, like me, I think this is more geared towards someone who is in web design or video editing. But you know, you can always like remove options by hitting the delete button. And then it confirms and you can delete these and edit these as you see fit. Progress bar, you usually enter a number, and then it shows you or like the progress out of it's a percentage, so it's percentage based. This actually uses like a few more complex properties. So there's like progress bar and task left. I'd say if you don't and like relations, I'd say if you aren't familiar with these features on their own, sometimes it's okay to just remove it if you're not using it and you don't know how to use it, because a lot of the times that makes it more daunting to use and it's unnecessary. That is one qualm I think I have with a lot of Notion templates is they do get really complex and a lot of the time you don't use the features. And so it feels quite cluttered. But for example, if you did know how to use these and you were familiar with them, then maybe it does provide some use to you. But this is an example of a template. So you'll see that they have like projects appear, along with some buttons, which are another Notion feature. You can also create it. They're essentially like or automations that you create while creating the button. Here, the creator has added buttons for adding new tasks and new projects. We'll scroll down and there's also an area for some tasks that are shown in a board view, then also in another board view, but sorted by priority, and then a list view. And then there's a calendar and a timeline down here, which is another kind of view for a database. Some other templates that I've had are a notes template. So here, they've used a database to create notes in the form of notebooks. They have some links over here to different pages. You can also create pages and pages. That's kind of how the structure of Notion is. You also will see that they have some tutorials. A lot of Notion creators, a lot of Notion template creators have like tutorials or videos or just even like photos and explanations attached to it. That's also a good resource to turn to if there's some confusion over what the purpose is or what or how to use it to its fullest potential. And then of course they have some explanation of themselves down there as well. And then finally, one more case that I wanted to show was this KPI tracker. So this is quite simple. actually. But you'll see that the creator has showed different ways to view the same information of the underlying database in different forms. So here is like the kind of the back end, and that's where you can alter everything. There's that same kind of Notion property of like having and attaching people here. You can tell by the icon, I should also mention. So the icon tells you the kind of property it is, and then the title tells you what you've named it. So this is like a person-based Notion property. And then there's like a bunch of different fields for you to put any relevant information. Of course, the ability to add a new page. And yeah, that's just an overview of, I suppose, a few different ways that you can use that. Are there any questions on those different use cases or anything that I can go into greater detail on? Great. So I wanted to think, first, or I guess start my conclusion with some quick tips and words of advice. If you are like newer to Notion, I think the number one thing to drive people away from using a very great platform is overcomplicating it from the very beginning. So like I said, I showed you some templates a few minutes ago with a lot of different capabilities, but some of those things, like even personally, like, or some of those things I would have been unfamiliar with just starting off, which is why I started off with like starting the databases from scratch and then working up from there. If there are features that you're not familiar with and you don't know how to use or you don't want to use, it's always okay to just remove those and then adjust it for your personal use. So I usually say like start simple and then like start to build up as you gain some familiarity with the platform. And then also utilizing different database views are very beneficial for finding different ways to like view the data and also good for exploring different capabilities. I also think filtering and sorting is a great organization tool on databases. I briefly went over it, but essentially when you start to get more and more information in a database, you can start to get overwhelmed with the amount of information that's there. So you can use filters to remove some of that clutter, especially for things that aren't relevant. Okay. That is the end of my presentation. I thank you for listening. Are there any questions or things that anyone would like me to cover?
Yeah, I see another question here from Duo said, what support for diagramming does Notion provide? Is there any functionality for diagramming, for drawing?
For diagramming, can I have a little bit more elaboration on what that would like?
Maybe if you want to draw something, can
Mhm.
you draw?
Yeah, I think I can go back to, I'm gonna take a second to pause for a second. So Notion has a lot of integrations with other platforms. So I'm going to, like, for example, I kind of hit that like backslash button that I usually do. And oh goodness. So there's Excalidraw, which if you use that platform, that's perhaps something that you might want to take advantage of. What I will say about the integrations is that oftentimes, in my experience, I just prefer to use like a platform that's more geared towards that. I would say like Notion is, note-taking with extra database features. So diagramming, if I'm understanding like the term correctly. More like manual drawing is probably not the best platform for it, but there are like a lot of different integrations that you can explore to see if you could integrate something like that onto the platform. Yeah, so I can, if I scroll down here, so there's advanced blocks, and then there's inlines, and then there's embeds. So you'll see that there's a lot of different platforms that work with Notion that you can like view if you log in and utilize those.
Awesome. Yeah. I believe that answered your question? The other question I have is, seems some overlaps with Asana. Any thought on that? Asana is offering more visual structure for a brand new user. So do you think this kind of overlap with Asana? Or do you know what Asana? Asana is like a project management platform.
Yeah. So I'm not too familiar with Asana for my personal uses, but it's the same kind of their integrations with Asana. So if you wanted to use those to sync a database to like have the data interact or have the pages interact with Notion, that would work. I feel Notion brands itself as an all-in-one workspace, and I think if you get to very specific tasks, you could probably find a task that Notion does that another platform built for that specific use probably does better. I think what Notion might offer over other platforms would be customization and integration. So like I'm showing you right now, Asana, you can integrate or utilize with Notion in tandem. So if there's something that Notion does that this platform does, and also Notion does that like another platform does, instead of having two different platforms that do them like, like very well, but also like apart, you could have one platform that does it probably almost as well or just as well, but in one space. So like that, depends on your use. If you find that one platform does one thing that you want it to do and you don't need any extra, like I don't personally see the point in like trying to switch to another one if you know it already does it well. But if you want to integrate a bunch of different things into one place, I think Notion does that particular thing very, very well.
Thank you so much, Ebony. I don't know if there's any other question. I'm not seeing any. Okay, let me see. I'm not seeing any other question here. Okay. Thank you so much once again, Ebony. This has been an amazing session, like lots of value. I myself, this is the first time I'm hearing about Notion, and this has really been impactful. Thank you so much for this wonderful session. Ebony, yes, I can see everybody really enjoyed this. Great job. Thank you, Ebony. So everybody is really happy about this session. We have
Yes, thank you
officially
for
come
having
to the
me.
end of this session. This session is put together in collaboration from different chapters, IIBA chapters. We have Palmetto, Nova Scotia, Ottawa, DC Metro. Thank you once again, everyone, for being a part of this. I believe this has been a good use of your time, and I do wish you the best of the remaining day. Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
everybody.
you.
So yeah, this is being recorded. And once we have the permission from Ebony, then we can share with the different chapters, and that can be shared with the participants. Thank you so much, everyone. Do have a lovely day.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day. Thanks.
Thank you.
Ebony.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Olivia. Thank you.